Okay, it is 8:30 p.m. Wednesday, April 24th, 2019, and welcome to week 4 of Introduction to Corrections. And I'm Professor Richard Wright, and I'm going to cover a few things, and I'm going to talk about a few things concerning the project and remind each of you something. But I'm going to go right into sharing my screen. Okay. All right, here is the home page, which you all are familiar with. So I'm not going to go over that information there. Remind you that your rubrics are in each assignment, and then there's a discussion post-rubric. And then remind you that your lectures take place every other Wednesday. So we are at week 4. The next one we'll have it week 6, week 8, and week 10. So at this point, after we complete this one, there'll be 3 more lectures that take place. And I will post the recordings here, and I do send you the archive of the recordings. Okay. And I want to remind each of you that it appears that there are several students that I could tell that are not looking at the lectures. I guess me saying it now doesn't really matter, because those who don't look at the lectures won't hear me say this, but I'm still going to say it anyway. The lectures are to help you with your assignments. I stated during open house week 1 that I was only required to do 1 lecture this quarter, but as I do lectures every even week to help students and to clarify the assignments for that week and to keep you moving forward and keep you on track. And it appears that many did not look at the open house lecture, because there have been several students who sent me information saying that they weren't able to do their interviews for this week. And I remind students that based on the schedule that it was divided into 4 parts going back to week 1. So week 2, you had to submit your agency and contact information. That's what you had to do, and then submit a couple paragraphs as to why you selected that agency. That was it. And then coming up now to week 4, this week you're going to provide agency overview and background. It is not required that you provide an interview or have completed the interview by now. The interview is to be completed by week 7. And then finally, the final project, which is a culmination of the whole paper, which includes information from week 2, week 4, and week 6. Then from that particular point, week 2, week 4, and I think it's week 8. I don't think there's the week 6 there's anything that pertains to it. But anyway, the point matter is that your next assignment is not due. Next one is due after week 4 is week 7. Week 7, that's when it is. And then your final project is due week 9. So let's take a look at what we have for week 4. Jails and prison we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the difference between the 2. We're going to, as you recall, when we started this out, that the assignment for the project, that there could only be 1 of 4 areas: jails, prison, probation, or parole, and that law enforcement is not acceptable, and then there are students who still submitted law enforcement, but today we're going to talk about two of those choices, jails and prisons. To prepare for this assignment, you're going to read sections 3 and 6 of the textbook, and you should also by now have received the coinciding PowerPoints that go with it to help you to study. And then look at the activity, prison versus jail. Then we'll provide an interview regarding all jail issues today. And then a look inside a maximum security prison. We won't cover that one because it doesn't come out very well in the lecture. You'll have to look at that on your own. And then here's the link to where we are now. And then your discussion assignment, the initial post, issues facing jails, was due yesterday the 23rd by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then your reply post, due by Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And you should be well aware that those posts should be detailed, provide information. I do welcome citations and references, but don't take away points for it. And I do encourage you to reply to more than one post. And I do say once again to students that your discussion posts forum ends after Saturday night, 11:59 p.m. That means that if you have not submitted your initial post by Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, if you submit your initial post or reply post on Sunday alone, you will not receive any points. However, if you submit your initial post by Saturday night, even if it's late, and then you submit your reply post alone or reply post by Sunday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, you will get credit for it, but you will lose a point. So get that clarified, because I've had a few students to try to submit posts after the discussion forum ended, and they hadn't submitted a post by that Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And the post is just not going to be accepted, and you won't get any points for it. And then finally, complete the written assignment, your state prison classification, and course project, which is the agency overview and background. Okay, and remember, when you do your written assignments, it's citations in the body and references at the end. Citations in the body and references at the end. Now, when we get to week 6, we'll discuss what's due week 7 for the interview, and then you'll hear something a little bit different. But keep in mind that all written assignments, with the exception of the interview, require citations in the body and references at the end, and must be follow APA format. Cover page, double spaced, 12-point Roman. Okay, and then those assignments are due on this Sunday coming up. And then your mid-quarter student survey, if you could take time to complete that, we'd appreciate that. It's voluntary, it's not a graded assignment at all. And then you know what my motto is at Virtue Springboard to Success. If you have looked at or listened to the lecture from the open house, because I covered that and explained it. So now let's take a look at the course calendar. And the course calendar tells you where we are right now. As you can see, at the 24th, again, your reading assignments are there for the week. Your initial post, live lecture here, your reply post, and then the 28th, the mid-quarter survey, the 2 written assignments as well. So both written assignments are due on the 28th. And that's what these two check marks represent by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. So if you were to click on them, it'll tell you agency and overview when it is due by. Okay, then it tells you agency and overview, okay. And then it tells you when your state prison classification assignment is due, same time, okay. And then this will be week 5 after that. You follow through the assignments there. And then you will see not until week 6 that we have a lecture again. So your next lecture, this will be your last lecture for April. So your next lecture will be the 8th of May after today. All right. So let's close this down. Okay, the tools. Okay, so now let's take a look at the module itself. So now that we are in week 4 module, let's first go over the assignments and look at the rubrics. So here's your course project, agency, overview, and background. And it tells you what you're supposed to do. And, you know, you can do this by primarily doing some research online, checking websites, but make sure that you provide the requirements. So, and you don't do it with these bullet points. Just write it out. Write it out. If you want to put subtopics in your papers, that's fine. So for each topic, whether you're doing jail, prison, probation, and parole have the same requirements. Notice the things that you're supposed to cover. Notice all of them require the mission statement. Every agency has a mission statement, and you should be able to find that mission statement through research of the organization, and you're going to be able to have to provide citations and references. Just because this is set up single space, the assignment is not single space, it is double space. And it tells you up here, okay? And it tells you the importance of the mission statement. And include a discussion of how the mission statement is reflected in the information from the background information you discover of the agency. And so you're going to be applying your skills, transferable skills of digital fluency and ethics and professional responsibility in this part of the assignment. Okay. It says access a website to conduct the research on your agency. Mission statements reiterate the ethical and professional responsibility of the field itself. All right, and that's what you need to do. Citations in the body, references in the end. Please do not submit any of your documents ever in PDF. It says Microsoft Word document, and most of you understand that. Very, very important. And then run your paper through Grammarly so that you make sure that you're not copying, particularly this week, because you could be guilty of copying a whole bunch of information but provide no analysis for it. And, you know, your information generally should take at least 2 pages. It doesn't say that, but it's important for you to do it. I don't want a short thing for each of these points to be covered. Very important, very important. So that's the part of your paper that's called agency and overview background, which, by the way, when you get to your final paper, you're going to possibly use captions for week 2 and week 4, agency, overview, and background, and then present the same information that you've already gathered in this assignment, okay? That's why it's important that you do each assignment correctly, and I've already shared that with you with my comments. Now let's look at the rubrics that are under that. Due date, and then let's look at the rubric. And the rubric tells you you're going to get 15 points for providing this information. Okay? Remember, it's going to vary based upon whether you're doing jail, prison, probation, or parole. Okay? Remember, probation and parole are going to be pretty much the same information. And then this is the standard requirement. It should be at least 2 pages. I said that. And then APA formatted, citations in the body, references at the end, a cover page, and then it says never use Wikipedia or generic sources. In this case, you really shouldn't anyway, because you're going to be checking the agency itself. And so you get 25 points for that assignment. All right? So now let's take a look at the written assignment. Research the Department of Corrections in your state. It's just similar to the one that you did a couple of weeks ago in week 2. Identify the number and types of prison. Now, you don't have to have, you know, like there's so many different ones, but provide a brief overview of the classifications and how inmates are assigned. Be sure that you also have your run it through Grammarly, and that any sources in APA format. And I already shared with you about APA. Some of you still don't get it. Some of you refuse to put citations in the body. And it's not that difficult a thing to do, but you need to make sure that it's done in order to maximize your points. Again, here's the rubric. Rubric tells you exactly what I'm expecting you to do. Brief overview of each classification, a minimum of 1 page. Don't be afraid if you go beyond 1 page, okay? And you see it again, APA requirements there as well. All right? And those are your written assignments. The only other thing that's a written assignment in here is your discussion post. And we've already covered the issues there, issues facing jails, okay? Many of you have honed in on overcrowding and mental health placements, and violence, and budget cuts, just to name a few, but there are others as well. I indicate that educated correction officers should be one of the issues, and there should be enough officers, correction officers, based on the number of inmates. So when the ratio is too high, and the correction officer is not able to do the job and maintain control of the facility. So, and then you're going to answer these questions here as well. Okay, there's a discussion post right here. All right. So that's the assignments for the week. All right. Just for a moment before I get into anything, here are the assignments for next week, week 5, cruel, unusual punishment. And you have, of course, the rubrics for that. And that's not due until Sunday, May 5th, but it tells you what the requirements are. And make sure in a 1 to 2 page paper, explain your understanding of what cruel and unusual punishment is. Include at least 2 cases as examples. Now, when you cite cases, please be sure you cite the entire case name and citation. Okay? Very important, because I constantly remind students to do that all the time. All right? So that's again, this is week 5 I'm talking about. So I'm helping you out there. And then you'll discover in week 5 your discussion post, and then there is a quiz. And we already kind of talked about those quizzes. They are timed, and once you start them, you can't stop them, and that's what you will be doing, okay? Because there will not be a lecture during week 5. That's why I'm mentioning those assignments right now. Okay, let's go back to Module 4, where we are today, and let's go into talking about jails and prisons. So jail versus prison, and then don't worry about a look inside a maximum security prison, but look at the interview, which we're going to conclude at the end. Okay. So what is the difference in jails or prison? And sometimes they're used interchangeably, but actually they're not interchangeable. Jails are for shortened periods of time. You will find that most individuals who are in jails are incarcerated there while they're awaiting trial, or either they've been sentenced for a misdemeanor. And a misdemeanor sentence is one where it is considered short term because it is less than 1 year. Okay? And also, jails are generally pretty close to where the courthouse is, and or where the main courthouse is. Like, for example, in Chicago, we have courthouses throughout the Cook County, for example, but the main one at 26 in California, called the Layton Courthouse, Cook County Jail, is right there. But in most jurisdictions, such as where I'm at here in Illinois, in Will County, right behind the county courthouse in Will County is the jail. So it's usually in a area that's close by, and it's oftentimes not in the suburban area, but it's in the actual urban areas. Okay, and those individuals are usually, when you first come in, whether it's either one, but jails, you're processed through booking. They take your photographs and all those things, fingerprints, and then bond is set. Bond is set, and usually bond can vary from the amount of the crime. Generally, it's not very high. And if, for example, a $100,000 bond, which is high generally in a misdemeanor case, particularly when it's a nonviolent offense, is 10% of that, or $10,000. But usually the bond is like $1,000, and a person has to post $100. But then there are times when the individual cannot post bond, and the misdemeanor is, of course, not a serious offense. Then they'll release on what we call on recognizance, or ROR, or we use the vernacular I bond, which is not EYE, but the letter I for an I bond. And that's vernacular that's used across usually a lot of jurisdictions, but in Illinois and Cook County particularly. So the court establishes bail and the conditions that that person is released. And and as I said already, jails are in urban areas, and they generally operate under the authority of the county sheriff or local police department. But when we talk about the bigger jails, we're talking about the counties, and the sheriff of that county, an elected official, is responsible for the jail populations. Now, one of the issues that takes place in jails is generally there is a high population, and there are problems that come about because of overcrowdedness, because individuals are there who can't make bail, and many jurisdictions now have started to work on that because it creates a security problem for the officers, the correction officers, jail officers, and so it creates a dangerous situation for the inmates as well. And then there are special sections usually that they try to set up for individuals who are, of course, females are not included there with the males. And then there's oftentimes a hospital section or place where people have mental problems or either other ailments that cause them to be placed while they're incarcerated in jails. Budget issues are a big problem because of the fact that money is always an issue, and they don't have enough money to hire enough officers, jail officers or correction officers to operate the facility. What has happened in some instances is that privatization, where there are companies out here, and I deplore them, that operate jails and they cover those jails. But what happens though is that there are private organizations that provide like food and other things to individuals who are in jail awaiting trial, and some of it is medical, some of it is mental health care, and as I said, food service and other types of programs that take place while individuals are in jail, such as work release or either some other type of intermediate type of activities that take place in programs and those. So it talks about how small jails don't have the resources or the staff and space I already talked about, but that most of the jails do provide some form of education. For example, GED. I am, though, familiar with a process in Illinois that took place that started in room 702 at 26 in California, the Layton Courthouse, when I was practicing full-time, where it was called Probation Challenge. But that fell under probation, where individuals were allowed to get their GEDs. They did not if they committed an offense that might put them in a misdemeanor situation, not a felony and not a violent offense. But the point of the matter is that if they completed their GED, then they would be allowed to have the case dismissed. But what does happen in jails is that GED and other educational programs are provided there for individuals. And of course, those who have drug problems and alcohol problems, there is a necessity for the treatment programs to exist because, as I always say, that recidivism is one of the major problems. That means repeat offenders, where individuals get out and they come back. Throughout the years, I practiced law. I have seen individuals that we call it recycled individuals. And then we also see generations where the children of some of the individuals who have been incarcerated over and over and over. And so anyway, the key is we've learned that education helps to decrease recidivism. We didn't say it eliminates it, but it is pretty easily ascertainable that if you look at the cost to educate someone, it's cheaper than the cost to incarcerate them. And so the fewer people that are incarcerated, the less the costs are, and the financial restraints on the agency there. And then drug and alcohol treatment programs. If you have an individual who's incarcerated in jail and you release them, they're going to commit crimes because both of those I consider as illnesses, and they need to be treated as well. Same thing with mental illness. Individuals need to be treated for that, or else they're going to continue to commit offenses. Then, as I said earlier, there's work release, and then there's other organizations that go with drug and alcohol treatment, such as AA, Narcotics Anonymous, and there are vocational programs where people learn how to have trades. I know that in the Cook County Jail, they have a program for an individual if they want to become barbers, to cut hair, and they're able to learn how to do so because it gives them a trade to start on when they come out, and maybe they will increase their chances of going in a new direction and decrease their chances of becoming recidivists or repeat offenders. And so some of the issues facing jails, I've already addressed them, like overcrowding. There's a large, tremendous amount of violence because people are bunched up together. There's mental health placements we talked about. And again, there is some issues with direct supervision of inmates as required inspections and improved quality of life. So the inmates who are incarcerated in jails should be not in inhumane, but in humane conditions, so that they are able to not be endangered or suffer loss of life or serious bodily injury while incarcerated. It's clear that individuals who are incarcerated for sex crimes, generally those individuals are not misdemeanors but are felonies, but they're awaiting trial in jail. They have to segregate those individuals because they can be victims of attacks. And that's pretty much jails. So now let's switch over to the long-term agency, which generally houses felons, where you are committed at least a year and a day, and almost every jurisdiction has prisons in their counties spread throughout, in the states that are spread throughout the state. And almost everybody who goes to prison are in state prisons, and not as many in federal prisons. Now, there are some individuals who do commit state acts. They still put them in federal prisons for their safety, and generally it is thought that federal prisons are more, how should I say, humane than state prisons, and it is something that, for example, they have individuals who they have to keep moving from state prison to state prison. They might put them in a federal prison, and those have, a lot of them are like, some of them are even as often called country clubs because of how they are. Okay, some don't even have fences, and the individuals who are there are kept there under minimum security. So approximately 90% are sentenced for violent offenses, and 50 involve racial and ethnic differences. There's groups, and I don't know where that percentage comes from, but there are more minorities incarcerated in prison today than there are Caucasians and other groups. And I tell people the truth, that you statistically, when you go to prisons, as I visit prisons when I was practicing law, to visit clients and other individuals, then I had to, that many of them were not Caucasian. I did have some, but African American and Hispanics. Some were other ethnic groups that are minorities as well, but primarily African American and Hispanics. So the FOP, which is the Federal Bureau of Prisons, kind of looks at the facilities that are prisons and that are federally operated, and then they deal with those individuals who are confined through prisons, and also agreements with the state and local governments. And some are even privately operated. As I said, I have a problem with that because those individuals are going to operate on the basis of contracts, and so therefore usually the pressure is put upon the agency that has the contract with them, whether it's a city, a state, or a county, to provide people, or else they breach the contract. So what does that mean is that you find law enforcement has a responsibility of maybe arresting individuals, and they really shouldn't be arrested, and they're kept there. And you and I already know that there's been many wrongful convictions that have been overturned based on DNA and other technological advancements that have made it possible to determine that there are people who are incarcerated in prison who didn't commit offenses, and the sentence is long. And then they find out, oops, wrong person. They release them, and then oftentimes they give them some money, nice little cash settlement, but nothing can replace the lost time that they had while they were in prison. And also the other negative aspect of that is those individuals had adapted to prison life in order to survive, even if they weren't guilty of an offense. But when they come out, they might be ones who commit offenses based upon the things that they learned while in prison to cause them to become individuals who will commit crimes, even if they were totally innocent because of being there and surviving. It says, in addition to the FOBOP, Federal Bureau of Prisons, there are 50 separate state departments of corrections, as I said that earlier, as well as the District of Columbia, and then all deal with recidivism, the costs, and other institutional issues. So states might differ, but there are still similarities that take place and based on the classification. And so now we spend a little time talking about the classifications, range from maximum, from minimum to supermax. And a minimum security prison is usually one where it's easygoing, it's kind of like dorm living, it's a relaxed security parameter. I was talking about that. Usually you'll find those in the feds, but then there are some state facilities that operate the same way. And then those individuals are usually the ones who end up leaving and committing, to attend school and work on work release, or as opposed to staying there all the time and maybe not just doing the educational educational learning incarcerated, but they're allowed to go to institutions that are outside with other individuals who haven't committed offenses. But those are minimum security. And these are, again, remember, these are nonviolent offenses that I'm talking about, but what puts them in this mode is that the sentence that they get. What can happen there is individuals who, for example, commit thefts that are a certain amount over, not violent thefts. When you start to use weapons and things like that, then you start to move up the ladder from a minimum security. And these are basically nonviolent individuals. And, you know, it's interesting that there are individuals who unfortunately find themselves incarcerated and subsequently released and were wrongfully convicted. They're not in the minimums. They end up in the next categories that we talk about. So then there's the medium security, where it's two people double bunked. Fencing, you could see those all the time with the guards and the towers and the weapons, and there's controlled access. Usually there's segregation a lot. And then there are also industrial and educational activities, but those are generally within the walls itself. And then we get to the maximum security. This is where hardcore, you start to see stone walls. Like, for example, Stateville, which is not too far from where I am here, is a maximum security facility. And then you see cell observation where the guards or correction officers are walking through constantly. They might have bridges and things that they can see. The toilet and the sink is in the room itself. There's no separate area for it. It's double fenced. And then, as I said, watchtower with armed guards and restricted movement within the cell block or the pod. So there's probably more segregation involved there. And these are individuals who are, we're getting more toward the violent offenders as well. And then there's the supermax. These are facilities where, because of the kind of individuals that are incarcerated, they're the real bad ones. Generally, there is 23 hours of lockdown, which means they only have 1 hour out. There's video cameras constantly on these individuals. Cement walls occurs like the maximum, and no communication with each other, and security housing units. Now, be aware that there is an organization called the John Howard Association that monitors the facilities, whether minimum or maximum or supermax, to make sure that there are humane conditions there for individuals. So just because you're in supermax, you shouldn't be in inhumane conditions. But again, we have the problem of overcrowdedness and the budgetary issues where there's not enough facilities for individuals, and they're stacked up, and it creates a problem. Where there's too many people in an area, or more than the capacity which should be there in an area, there's more likely to be violence and things of that nature taking place. All right. So the prison design is depending various shapes and designs, round, radial, telephone pole, courtyard, campus, varies according to the security classification level based upon these up here. In prison, the warden is the one responsible for what takes place there. Associate wardens assist with various, it's like the cabinet of the warden, deal with industrial and agricultural issues. Now remember, prisons are not urban generally. There are some, but most are. Like, for example, Illinois, Chicago has the Federal Correctional Center downtown in the urban area, but most are in the rural areas. And so anyway, back to the warden. The warden is held responsible for the prison. I have a former student who reached the level of what they call major in prison, which meant that they were right behind the warden and might be considered as associate wardens, because oftentimes when the warden is not there, then they will take over the facility. And this young lady that I had as a student, we keep in touch with each other, and she's helped me on the advisory board with students who had to complete assignments, that want to do corrections. What happened is that she herself actually ran a male facility and was highly respected by the way that she operated the facility. I heard said, and you'll hear say it in this course, that in jails and prisons, if you're the person, the correction officer or the warden, you have to be firm, fair, and consistent. Firm, fair, and consistent, and not show favoritism and things, because you create possible problems that can exist in the prison itself. And so there are lawsuits that take place, what we call 1981 lawsuits or other lawsuits, were brought by inmates for saying that they were subjected to cruel and unusual punishment in violation of the 8th Amendment, or 1981 suits, civil rights lawsuits that are filed. And then there are, of course, there's standards which we talked about previously about what, and we will talk about more in detail, procedural requirements for suits that have to be have to go through civil process to minimize the cases that reach the courts, because there are a lot of frivolous lawsuits that come out of prison. So there are suits and there are procedures that are established by the prisons themselves. Staff development and, of course, fiscal management. Again, there's budgetary issues because the prisons are operated by the counties, by the states, and the state have budgetary problems which oftentimes relate to the prisons themselves and result in, as I said earlier, overcrowdedness. So wardens, it says, strive for inmate programming and staff development in an attempt to be proactive and prevent problems, but because of the budgetary issues, they will still have problems. Okay, so I'm going to take about 10 minutes and we're going to take a look at this video. Be able to hear it, and I'm going to activate the closed caption if there are some, but I will at this point get the video started. And
tell me about your background and your position here in Sherburne County.
Sure. Well, I work at the Sherburne County Jail for the past 18 years. Over the past 18 years, I've held the capacity of a corrections officer, of a jail sergeant, the jail captain, and currently I'm the assistant jail administrator.
Okay. And your background?
Before that, I worked for Gov Foods. I was assistant produce manager. I was going to St. Cloud State University when I was the assistant produce manager. And then I had an opportunity to apply for Sherburne County, which I did, and I was accepted. Before that, I was in the Marine Corps Reserve. I'm a veteran for the first Gulf War, which I learned a lot of things. It was an experience that I'll never forget, and gained a lot of experience out of it. Before that, I was at St. Cloud State University. So St. Cloud State University, I joined the Marine Corps Reserve. I didn't graduate at that point, and ended up getting activated for the Gulf War. And when the Gulf War was done, came back and went back to school and worked at Gov Foods.
Okay. Can you tell us about the setup of your jail and the types of inmates you serve?
Yes, our jail is actually, it's kind of a unique jail. We hold federal inmates, so we have a contract with the U.S. Marshal Service and Immigration to hold federal inmates. Most of the inmates that we have are federal inmates. On any given day, we have about 80 to 100 county inmates. The rest of our inmate population are federal. We have pushed over 600 inmates. A couple years ago, we were pushing that every day. Recently, it's dropped down to about 400 on any given day. Inside the jail, its design is unique as well. There's 3 different kind of styles of the layout of the facility. We have linear style, we have modular remote, and we have direct supervision.
What do those things mean?
The linear style jail is basically a day room that has cells attached to the day room, and there's not a corrections officer that's in the unit, that's watching the unit all the time. The corrections officers make rounds, so they have to make rounds every 15 to 30 minutes, going through and just making sure that things are okay. It's a difficult area to control because you're not always observant on what's going on in there, so it makes it more difficult. What we've done with that area is made it into a special management area. So this is where we have our lockdown inmates. So if they go into disciplinary sanctions, they're locked down 23 hours a day, and they have 1 hour out where they can go into the day room. And once they have that hour out, they can use the phone, they can shower, read the paper. So that's basically what they're able to do during that hour. We only have or allow one person out at a time, so there's no contact between the inmates back there in our disciplinary setting. So, but when I first started, that was our jail. It was a linear style jail. And we would end up going to situations. We were usually putting situations out all the time, putting fires out, because you didn't know what was going on all the time. The Padre remote is it's also in our special management area, but it's an area where we keep vulnerable adults, people that are classified at a lower level, people that have crimes that we want to pull away from the regular inmate population, such as sex crimes. Those crimes typically aren't very well thought of by the general population, and those people can be subject to manipulation, subject to some extortion, and they're subject to being able to be assaulted in the facility. So we want to pull those people out, keep them safe, and we have a workstation that's in a hallway that has glass that overlooks that area, and that's the Padre remote. It's a little bit better than the linear supervision for watching the inmates because you've got sight of line, so you're able to see the inmates, throughout the day, but you don't really hear what's going on in there. But it works well for what we have. And then we have direct supervision. Direct supervision is our general population, and in that area we have corrections officers in with the inmates throughout the entire day. And that works real well because not only do you see the inmates all the time, but you're walking, you're talking, and you get a lot of information. You get to hear what's going on inside the unit. And you'll hear this from corrections officers that have been around. You feel what's going on in the unit. So you get to know and feel the vibe that's going on inside that housing unit.
Okay. You touched on this, but could you talk more about administrative issues in the jail?
Sure. Our administrative duties are to make sure that the facility is being run according to state law and constitutional law, following our policies and procedures. So we, in administration, we write the policy and procedures for the staff to follow, and we make sure that the staff are following them. We take care of the hiring, the staff discipline. We make sure that all the needs of the facility are met. We have female inmates in custody. We have federal inmates in custody. We have immigration inmates in custody. And we have our county inmates in custody. And we just make sure that the facility is being run in the right direction.
Okay. What are some issues facing jails today?
One of the biggest issues that we have, and it's different from when I first started 18 years ago, is mental illness in corrections. The mental illness facilities that we had back, when I first started 18 years ago have been shut down, and there's not a lot of options to be able to send people who are in need of controlling their mental illness through medication and doctors. They're not around anymore, so they are being kept in the jails. We have probably 1/3 of our population on psychotropic medication. So that's probably one of the biggest issues that we face. That is a change from when I first started.
Okay, you mentioned your background. Can you tell us what are the minimum qualifications to be a correctional officer?
Sure. The minimum qualifications is a valid driver's license. You have to be a high school graduate, and that's your basic minimum qualifications. Now, we look, when we go through the interview process, and we're looking for people that are well-rounded, people that are great communicators, and we look for people that have had 2-year degrees, 4-year degrees. So that is more appealing when you're going through the interview process, and you're more likely to get a job with a 2-year or 4-year degree.
Okay. Do you have any advice for today's students?
You know, one of the things that we push in corrections is firm, fair, and consistent. So if you get into this business, it's very important for you to be firm on the rules, consistent with the rules, and you have to be fair with the rules. You can't be allowing one individual to do something that you're not allowing another individual to do. Going through the interview process, it's very important to do a little research on what you're getting into. So when you're going through the interview process, you're able to intelligently answer the questions that are being asked. Communication is probably the biggest thing that we look for, a good communicator. Someone that isn't afraid of being able to talk to people and give them bad information on occasion, and but being able to deliver that information in a way that isn't going to jeopardize any kind of security issues in the facility.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, that's it for that. I'm going to plug back in my headset, which should kick in.
All right. So now you should be able to hear me now through my headset. Yep, you can. And so one of the things that you learned was what I talked about, firm, fair, and consistency. And you also learned this, is that there is a movement toward hiring correction officers, jails and prisons that have associates and bachelor's degrees. You're more likely to get a job, even though the minimum requirements there are, in some instances, still stated as I said, a high school diploma. And but one of the things, of course, you already know this, that you need to be able to pass a background check and also a drug test as well. So you need to be able to remain consistent with those. You should be aware too that, by the way, the correction officers are sometimes subjected to surprise drug tests throughout their employment because of what they could be exposed to while they're working in the facility itself. So you're going to run across those kind of situations as well. And then the other thing is this, is that individuals have to be able to be good communicators. That is one of the things that they stress, and remember, that's one of our transferable skills. So you understand that when we talk about the transferable skills in these courses that we teach, that we're preparing you for the real world, so that when you do go out there, that you're able to get a job. Okay, and so I'm going to go back into the classroom now, and hopefully the information that you ascertain or learn is going to be beneficial to help you. As my video back again, and that you'll be able to understand what it takes to become a corrections officer and perform in a professional manner. So it's about 9:29, so I am going to adjourn this session. I will be sending out this to each of you, and I'm going to say good night. Remember, our next lecture is not next week, but in week number 6, which means basically we'll be in the second half of this course. So I'm going to say good night.